Hi guys, it's me. It is Sunday, so I'm in a Sunday outfit. As you can see, Winnie is joining us, and Kaya is joining us. Say hi, Kai. And my other dog is sleeping across the way. So, these are your homework notes for natural selection as part of our evolution unit, and it's very important that you take these notes and answer the questions so that you will be prepared for class tomorrow. Recognize that as I continue making these homework videos, there will be no date shown here or here because I want to reuse these videos and the date will change depending on when I use them, so just fill in the date of today. The topic, regardless, will be natural selection homework notes, so please update your table of contents. Alright, so today at home, the goal is for you by the end of this video to explain the process of natural selection and how it relates to evolution. You'll listen to this video, read some information, and write some notes. So in class we did a lab on evidence for evolution. This is a little summary and it's starred. You need to at least write the underlined words down, and then if you want to include the rest to help you, I would recommend that, but it's not required. So the first piece of evidence, though there's no order, is transitional fossils, which are the bones that we've found that have changed over time in different layers of rock. So if you find a fossil at a very low layer of rock, it would be older than a fossil that was found more recently, because you can think if an animal died and then, sand and rock accumulated over it, then if an animal dies here, and it keeps going, clearly this animal was a more recent living species than the one way down here. So horses are our explanation or our example of this. They started out a long time ago as little creatures with 4 toes, and the fossils show them getting bigger over time and eventually leading down to only 1 large toe. This is what helps them run at the speed that they need to live in today's environments. Please pause the video whenever you need to, by the way, to write down the notes. The next piece of evidence is comparative anatomy. Comparative means to compare between 2 things. Anatomy is in reference to your bones and your structures. So in comparative anatomy, we can look at homologous structures, which are the same bones in different species, showing that we have a common ancestor. For example, the bone in the limbs of a human, horse, cat, bat, bird, and whale all have the same kind of bones. So we have the radius and ulna, the humerus, and it's amazing that even though we are such different species, the bones are all still there, they're in the same order. So this shows that a long time ago, way back up here, we all started out as the same species, and now we look different over time because we had to live in such different environments. Third piece of evidence is embryology, which is the study of embryos, so the tiny, tiny little starts of an organism that occur in a mother. So this is evidence for evolution because many organisms have a tail and gills at their earliest stages of development. So for example, fish, tortoise, chick, rabbit, and human, that should say human, not man, we all look very, very similar. We look like tiny little shrimps, kind of. So we all have a tail and gills. So even you, as a baby, when you were in your mother, you looked like this. This is not an olden day. This is as the cells are dividing to make a baby, they end up forming this shape. And then as the more you divide, you lose your tail, you lose your gills, and you end up looking like a human baby. And lastly, DNA evidence. So if you looked at the DNA, all the little bases, right, A, T, C, and G, if you look at the DNA of 2 species, you can count how many bases they have similar. And the more bases they have in common, the more related they are. So here's an example of a bunch of species and their DNA transcripts, all the A's, T's, C's, and G's. As you can see, they start out having the same bases, but then immediately at C and D, there's a difference. So all the bolded ones show differences. And this structure down here is called a cladogram, which we will learn about in a day or two. And the species that are close together on the cladogram are more related, and then they branch off as there's some differences. Good, so this is the summary of what we did in the lab. Make sure you have at least this title and these 4 words. And then if you want to write any notes to help you out, I would recommend it because you will need to have to explain why we believe evolution to be true. Good, so going forward we're going to be talking about mechanisms for evolution, which basically means ways that evolution occurs. So the most important one is natural selection. We talked about it briefly before, but natural selection is the process by which organisms best adapted to the environment survive, reproduce, and pass on their traits. Definitely copy all this down. Even if you had it, you might as well write it again because it's that important. So basically it means that organisms that have characteristics that help them live in that environment will survive and pass on those traits. So for example, I'm in a ridiculous pink outfit right now, right? Let's say that this pink is the ground and Kaya is an animal living on the ground. She is not blending in, right? You can see her pretty well. So she would be eaten. So her trait of dark fur is not helping her adapt and survive. If she was a pink cat, she would be best adapted, she would survive, and she would pass on that pink trait. But if she was living in a pink world, she would get eaten. She wouldn't be able to pass on any traits to her kids because she wouldn't be alive. I keep using the word trait. A trait is a distinguishing quality or characteristic. So most simply, it's just something about you. Something that you can physically see or how you act. So your hair color, your arm length, your height, those are all traits. They're things about you. More specifically, a distinguishing quality, so something special about you, or characteristic. So you can write that down. So here is natural selection in a nutshell. Basically, all species show variation, which means differences. So here's some giraffes. This giraffe just so happens to have a shorter neck. This giraffe just so happens to have a longer neck. Just like people look different, right? People have different skin colors, hair colors, eye colors, heights, weights. We all look different. It's just how it is. All animals have that kind of variation. So here's an example of two individuals that have different traits, but one of them is going to be better adapted to the environment. So the one with the long neck is going to be able to reach higher leaves on the trees, get more food, and survive. This is known as survival of the fittest, which you've probably heard about, which fit basically means you are best able to survive. So the ones that survive are adapted well to the environment, and they have kids, right? That's because, sorry, I guess I skipped two. That's because you have to compete for food. Even humans do that, really. There's not enough resources in the world to feed everyone and everything. So the animals compete, and the ones that are best adapted survive, have kids, and now this one's been killed, this one had kids, the kids also have long necks, they survive. People used to believe, and I guess some people still do, in Lamarck's theory, which is wrong. He believed that giraffes, because they needed to survive, they just kept stretching their neck farther and farther and farther until eventually it grew. But that is not the case. What actually happened is that some giraffes just so happen to have longer necks, just like there just so happens to be taller humans, and those giraffes were the ones that survived, the short ones died, and the long-necked giraffes had babies. So these are the steps of natural selection. We start with variation. You want to write these down. Variation just means random differences that are due to mutation. Remember, a mutation is a change in the DNA sequence. So like going from the letter A to the letter T. So naturally, there are differences everywhere, known as variation. Due to that variation, we get differential reproduction, which basically means that some of the traits that come from the DNA are better suited than others, and those are the organisms that survive. So in this example, the brown color trait was better adapted because they're living on a brown tree, so the green bugs get eaten, and the green bugs will not be able to pass on their traits. So basically, the ones that survive pass on traits to their offspring. Now, it's possible that one of the green ones survived, maybe it was hiding, and it bred with the brown, and now as they're having kids, notice that the population is turning more brown because the brown ones are the ones that are passing on their genes because they're the ones that are still alive. So this is basically all evidence for evolution. Evolution means changing over time, and some people believe we have never changed, but species have to change if the environment changes in order to survive. So we have all the green guys and brown guys. The green guys get eaten, the brown ones survive, the brown ones reproduce, and now clearly the population has changed from majority green to majority brown. All right, this last little bit, I made this little story for you guys to demonstrate that mutation is not a choice, right? So the giraffes did not choose to grow longer necks. It just so happened. So, for example, say we have a nice snowy environment with some snow mice, which are not real things, but whatever. We have two parent mice, hi mice, and they have babies. Now, babies don't all look the same, right? So it's possible they could have some brown babies in there if they have that recessive trait. All right, so they had their babies, but there are predators in the environment. Here comes a hawk. Oh no. Which babies is the hawk going to eat? Which babies are easier to see? The white ones, right? So, bam, hawk eats the brown babies. Bye, hawk. Well, the babies grow up, the ones that survived, because they were best adapted. They grow up, they have their own babies. Yay, lots of mice. But one day, you know, the parents die because they're old. One day, the world becomes very dark because all the snow melted and all of the fumes from the buildings, the soot, the dirt covered everything, made it black. Now when the hawk comes in, what's going to happen to the white mice? They're going to be eaten, exactly. Now, if all the white mice are eaten, and there are literally no more mice, they went extinct. Extinction is the end of a species where all the organisms are dead. So this can happen, right? If there were no variation, they were just all white, and the earth became dark, and the predators took advantage of that white coloration, the animals would die because they couldn't choose to suddenly become dark. Mutation is not a choice. But maybe there was a baby that was born dark, and maybe there was a white mouse that was hiding and didn't get eaten that day, and they are able to have babies. So they have babies, some of which are, you know, white and dark and maybe even tan. And the hawk is going to come back and eat the white baby, right? But these dark babies still survive. They have kids, and now the population has changed from lots of white to lots of dark. Change over time. All right, good job, guys. I will see you tomorrow.